When 18-year-old Leo noticed a black SUV circling the local playground for the fifth time, he knew something was wrong. But as a young man living on the streets, he knew that calling the police often resulted in him being moved along, rather than being heard. Desperate and sensing a predator in the shadows, he walked up to a group of Hell's Angels at the corner diner and whispered 5 chilling words, "That car is watching." The kids. What happened next was a masterclass in street justice. The Hell's Angels didn't call for backup. They were the backup. Before we reveal the terrifying truth of what was inside that vehicle and how the club handled it, I want to ask you, if you saw something suspicious but knew the authorities might not listen to a nobody, would you have the courage to speak up? Let us know in the comments. And tell us where in the world you are watching from today. Our community spans the globe and we love hearing from you. If you believe in protecting the innocent at any cost, hit that subscribe button right now. Now, let's go back to a hot Saturday afternoon at Miller Park. Leo was 18, but his eyes looked like they belonged to a man of 50. He had spent the last 2 years navigating the concrete labyrinth of the city after his foster mother passed away and the state decided he was old enough to be on his own. Leo didn't beg and he didn't cause trouble. He was a silent observer of the neighborhood's heartbeat. He lived on the edges of Miller Park, a vibrant green space that served as the lungs of an otherwise gray industrial district. Because he sat on the same weathered park bench every day, he noticed the micro shifts in the environment that most people missed. He knew which parents were distracted by their phones, which kids were the runners, and he knew every car that regularly parked on the perimeter. The black SUV was different. It was an older model Suburban with windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian. It had no license plates, just a dealership tag that looked fake even from a distance. It moved with a predatory slowness, creeping past the swing sets and the sandboxes at a walking pace. Leo had watched it go around the block 3 times in an hour. Each time it passed the entrance where the younger children played, it slowed down almost to a crawl. Leo's stomach churned. He had seen predators before. He had survived them in the shelter system. He knew that look, the look of a shark in shallow water, waiting for a moment of vulnerability. An hour ago, a patrol car had rolled by. Leo had stood up, waving his arms to get the officer's attention. But the cop had barely looked at him, rolling down the window just enough to say, "Not today, kid. Move your gear off the bench, or I'm writing you up for loitering." The cruiser sped off, leaving Leo standing in the heat, watching the black SUV turn the corner. For the 4th time, frustrated and feeling the weight of his own invisibility, Leo looked across the street. Parked in a perfect gleaming row outside the Iron Grill diner were 20 Harley Davidsons. The men sitting at the outdoor tables were the local chapter of the Hell's Angels. They were loud. Their laughter boomed over the traffic, and their leather vests bore the death's head patch that made most civilians cross to the other side of the road. Leo knew these men, not personally, but he knew their code. He had seen them break up a mugging behind the diner once, without calling the cops, and he'd seen them hand out $20 bills to the elderly woman who sold flowers on the corner. They didn't care about city ordinances or loitering laws. They cared about their territory, and Miller Park was their territory. Leo took a deep breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. Like a trapped bird, he adjusted the straps of his worn backpack, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and walked straight toward the center table. The bikers went quiet as he approached. 20 pairs of eyes hardened by the road and the life locked onto him. The man at the head of the table was Jax. He had a gray, streaked beard and eyes that looked like they were made of flint. He watched Leo approach with a neutral, unblinking stare. "You lost, son?" Jax asked, his voice a low rumble that felt like an idling engine. Leo didn't ask for change. He didn't ask for a sandwich. He leaned over the table, his voice a sharp, urgent whisper that cut through The noise of the street. That black SUV. No plates. This is the 5th time it circled the playground. They're looking for a kid, Jax. The cops won't listen to me, but I'm telling you, they're hunting. Jax didn't move for 3 seconds. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss the homeless kid. He followed Leo's gaze toward the corner of the park. Just as he looked, the Suburban appeared again, its tires crunching slowly on the gravel. It slowed down near a 5-year-old boy who had wandered a few feet away from his mother to chase a ball. Jax didn't finish his coffee. He didn't say a word to his brothers. He simply stood up, and as if moved by a single collective soul, the 19 other men stood up with him. The scraping of chairs on the pavement sounded like a declaration of war. "Big Mike," Jax said, not taking his eyes off the SUV. "Block the north exit. T-Bone, take the south. The rest of you, we're forming a perimeter. Nobody leaves that park until we see what's behind that tent." In an instant, the peaceful Saturday afternoon was transformed. The bikers didn't run. They moved with a terrifying, organized speed. Within 30 seconds, the roar of 20 engines erupted, a wall of sound that made the birds scatter from the trees. Leo watched breathless as the Hells Angels moved like a tactical unit. The driver of the Suburban realized too late that he had been spotted. As he tried to accelerate toward the park's exit, Big Mike's massive touring bike swung across the road sideways, blocking the path. At the same time, T-Bone and 3 others pulled up behind the SUV, pinning it in. The vehicle was trapped in a cage of chrome and leather. Jax walked toward the driver's side window. He didn't pull a weapon. He didn't need to. The sheer weight of 20 bikers surrounding the car was enough to crush the spirit of anyone inside. Jax knocked on the glass with a heavy silver ringed fist. "Roll it down," Jax commanded. The window lowered. "Just 2 in." A man's voice, high and nervous, came from inside. "I haven't done anything. You're harassing me. I'll call the police." "The police didn't want to talk to our friend Leo," Jack said, gesturing toward the 18-year-old standing on the curb. "But we're real good listeners. Why are you circling the kids, pal? Why no plates?" "I'm just looking for an address," the man stammered. "5 times around the same playground isn't an address," Big Mike growled, leaning his face close to the glass. "That's a shopping trip and we don't like what you're selling." Jax didn't wait for an answer. He reached into the cracked window, grabbed the door lock, and pulled. He swung the door open, revealing a man in his late 30s, who looked entirely too ordinary, except for the sweat pouring down his face and the binoculars sitting on the passenger seat. But it was what was in the back seat that made the air turn cold. There were rolls of heavy-duty duct tape, a set of industrial zip ties, and a pile of children's toys that looked brand new, still in their packaging. The bikers didn't need a jury. They knew exactly what they were looking at. "Lo," Jax called out, his voice deathly calm. "Come over here." Leo walked over, his eyes wide as he looked at the tools of a kidnapper scattered in the back of the car. He felt a wave of nausea hit him. If he hadn't walked across the street, if he had just stayed on his bench, one of those kids would be in that van right now. "Is this the car?" Jax asked. "Yes," Leo whispered. "That's him." Jax turned back to the driver, who was now weeping, begging for mercy. Jax didn't hit him. He didn't need to. He simply looked at the man with a disgust so deep it felt like a physical weight. "You're going to sit right here," Jax said, "and you're going to wait for the police because this time they're going to listen. And if you even think about moving, if you even look at those kids again, my brothers aren't going to be this polite." Jax turned to his brothers. "Mike, call that sergeant we know over at the 4th precinct. Tell him we've got a gift for him. Tell him a homeless kid did his job for him today." As the sirens began to wail in the distance, the parents in the park started to realize what had happened. Mothers clutched their children, looking at the SUV and then at the bikers. A silence fell over Miller. Park. A silence of profound realization. The scary men in leather had been the only ones watching over their families. But as the police arrived and began to process the scene, the CEO of a local security firm, who happened to be in the park with his own children, approached Jax. He didn't look at Jax with fear. He looked at him with respect. But then he looked at Leo, the 18-year-old in the dirty hoodie who had started it all. "You have a good eye, son," the businessman said. "Most people look, but they don't see. Why did you go to the bikers?" "Because they were the only ones who didn't look through me," Leo said simply. Jack stepped up beside Leo, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "He's got the instincts of a scout, and he's got the heart of a lion. He saved more than just one life today." The police sergeant, a man who had clashed with the Hells Angels for years, walked over to Jax. He looked at the evidence in the SUV, then at Leo. "You did good, kid. We've been looking for a vehicle matching this description in the 3 neighboring counties. You just stopped a serial predator." The sergeant looked at Jax. "I'll handle the paperwork. But Jax, don't think this means we're friends." "Wouldn't dream of it, Sarge." Jax grinned. "We just don't like trash in our park." As the crowd dispersed and the SUV was towed away, Jax turned to Leo. He saw the boy looking at his bench, the only home he had. Jax's expression softened. "Leo," Jax said, "that bench is retired. You're coming with us. We've got a clubhouse that needs a set of eyes like yours, and we've got a spare room. That's a hell of a lot warmer than a park bench." Leo looked at the line of motorcycles, then back at the playground, where the kids were safely playing. Again, he realized that for the first time in his life, he wasn't a ghost. He was a protector. But the story wasn't over. The man in the SUV wasn't working alone. He was part of a much larger, much more dangerous ring that had been operating in the city for years. And now that Leo and the Hells Angels had interfered with their business, they were coming for the boy. The predators were about to find out that when you hunt a member of the Hells Angels family, you become the hunted. The aftermath of the arrest at Miller Park sent shock waves through the city's social fabric, while the local news hailed the mystery tipster and the vigilante bikers who saved the children. A much darker force was watching the footage with cold, calculating fury. The man in the SUV had been more than a predator. He was a scout for a high-level human trafficking syndicate, a ghost organization that prided itself on being invisible within the city's noise. By spotting that black Suburban, Leo hadn't just saved a few children. He had compromised a multi-million-dollar inventory move scheduled for that weekend. The organization didn't believe in loose ends, and they certainly didn't believe in being humiliated by a homeless teenager in a motorcycle club. Leo's first night in the Hells Angels clubhouse was a sensory overload that felt like a fever dream. For the first time in 3 years, he wasn't sleeping with one eye open, listening for the footsteps of predators or the rustle of city rats near his cardboard pallet. He was in a rail bed, tucked into a room that smelled of motor oil, old leather, and cedar wood. He was protected by a wall of men whom the world considered outlaws, but whom he now knew were the only true guardians of the neighborhood. As he lay there, the silence was almost deafening, the kind of silence that only comes when you finally feel safe. However, the peace was a fragile glass that was shattered by Monday morning. The atmosphere in the clubhouse had shifted from celebratory to combat ready. Jax was huddled in the war room, with Big Mike and T-Bone staring at a series of encrypted messages and grainy surveillance photos captured by the clubhouse's perimeter cameras. Someone had been circling the block, not with the clumsy, predatory slowness of the child snatcher, but with the professional clinical precision of a professional hit squad. "They're looking for the kid," T-Bone growled, slamming his massive fist on the oak table. "They've pulled his description from the park. They know it was Leo who blew the whistle, and they want to send a message to the whole city. Nobody interferes with the syndicate. They've been pinging our digital fence all night, trying to see how deep our security goes. This isn't just a grudge, it's a takeover attempt. Jax looked at Leo, who was standing in the doorway, clutching a mug of coffee. The boy looked refreshed, but the hypervigilance hadn't left his eyes. Leo, come here, Jax commanded. His voice soft, but heavy with the weight of leadership. You did a brave thing, but in this city, brave things have a price. The man you caught was a small fish in a very black pond. Right now, the sharks are circling because you cost them money. A lot of it. We've spotted 3 different tail vehicles near our perimeter in the last 12 hours. They aren't hiding anymore. They're daring us to step out. Leo didn't flinch. Living on the streets had stripped him of his fear a long time ago. He had already faced the worst the world had to offer. If they're coming for me, let them come. But they won't stop with me, will they? They'll keep taking kids from that playground until someone cuts the head off the snake. I've seen them before. Not just the Suburban, but a blue van and a silver sedan. They operate out of the industrial district. I've seen the way they switch plates under the bridge. Jax's flinty eyes sparked with a newfound respect. That's what I was hoping you'd say. We don't just defend our walls, Leo. We take the fight to the gates. You saw that SUV before anyone else in this city did. You have an eye for detail. Can you help us find where they're hiding the rest of their operation? If we wait for them to strike us, we've already lost. We need to hit them where they breathe. For the next 8 hours, Leo sat with the club's tech specialist, a biker named Static. Together, they traced the route of the Suburban using hacked traffic cams and Leo's encyclopedic knowledge of the city's back alleys and hidden routes. Leo's mind worked like a map. He remembered seeing that same black SUV parked near an old abandoned cold storage warehouse in the industrial district near Pier 19, a place the homeless avoided because of the armed guards who patrolled the perimeter with dogs. He described the shift changes of the guards, the blind spots in the fence, and the specific time the heavy steel doors opened to let the trucks in. There, Leo pointed at a flickering screen showing a grainy overhead shot. That's the spot. Pier 19. They move the vehicles in and out at 4 a.m. when the fog from the harbor is thickest. They think the fog hides the movement. But I've watched them from the rafters of the old shipyard across the way. I've seen them moving crates that didn't have cargo inside. I've heard the crying. Jack, it's not just one car. It's a factory. Jax looked at the map and nodded. That warehouse is a fortress. If we go in there through the front, it'll be a bloodbath. They'll have time to move the cargo out the back or worse, use the children as leverage. We need a ghost. Someone who can get past the thermal sensors and the motion detectors that are tuned for the weight of a grown man. I'm the ghost, Leo said, stepping forward. I know the ventilation layout of that warehouse. I used to hide in the ducts during the winter of 22. There's a narrow shaft that leads from the roof directly to the central control room. If I can get in, I can kill the electronic locks on the side bay doors and let you in. I've done it before to get warm. I can do it now to save lives. Big Mike looked at Jax, shaking his head. It's a suicide mission, Jax. He's 18, but he's not a soldier. If they catch him in those vents, he's trapped like a rat. We can't ask him to do this. I was trapped the moment I saw that car, Leo countered, his voice ringing with a conviction that silenced the room. I'm the only one who fits in those vents. And I'm the only one who knows the blind spots of their cameras. Let me do this. For the kids who didn't have someone watching their playground. For the 18 years I spent being invisible, let me finally be seen for something that matters. The ride to Pier 19 was a masterclass in silent thunder. 40 motorcycles moved through the industrial shadows like a pack of wolves. Their engines tuned to a low hum, their headlights blacked out. They parked 2 blocks away in an alleyway, moving in on foot with the practiced stealth of a tactical unit. Leo slipped away from the group, his small live frame disappearing into the shadows of a rusted fire. Escape. He scaled the building with the agility of someone who had spent his life climbing fences to find a place to sleep. Inside the ventilation shaft, the air was stagnant and tasted of salt and rust. Leo crawled through the narrow metal tunnel, his heart drumming a frantic rhythm against the sheet metal. Below him, through the slats of the vents, he saw the horror the city had allowed to grow in its own backyard. Dozens of children were being held in makeshift plywood rooms, guarded by men with high-caliber rifles and cold indifferent eyes. He heard the guards laughing about their payday, discussing the children as if they were nothing more than livestock. At the center of the floor was a man in an expensive charcoal suit, the broker. "The buyer is 20 minutes out," the broker commanded, checking a gold watch. "Get the trucks loaded. And if that homeless brat or those bikers are found anywhere near here, I want them dealt with permanently. He's the reason we had to move the schedule up. I want this floor cleared before dawn." Leo reached the central control panel near the side bay door. His hands shook as he pulled a small toolkit Jax had given him. He bypassed the security lock, a trick he'd practiced for hours in the clubhouse basement. With a soft mechanical hiss, the massive steel bay doors began to slide open, letting the cold harbor air and 40 Hells Angels into the building. The guards turned, startled by the sudden influx of light and the roar of 100 boots hitting concrete, but they were too late. The Hells Angels didn't come in with a polite knock. They came in like a tidal wave of leather and iron. Jack and Big Mike led the charge, the roar of their entrance echoing off the high corrugated ceilings. The warehouse erupted into a frenzy of motion. The traffickers caught off guard and facing a brotherhood that fought with a primal protective fury began to break and run. The sound of flashbangs and the shouting of men filled the cavernous space. Leo didn't stay in the vents as he was told. He saw the broker grabbing a young girl from the nearest holding area, using her as a human shield as he backed toward a high-powered speedboat docked at the warehouse's internal pier. The broker's eyes were wild with desperation. "Let her go," Leo screamed, dropping 10 feet from the vent and landing on a pile of wooden crates. He didn't have a gun, but he had a heavy iron wrench he'd grabbed from the control room. The broker sneered, leveling a compact pistol at Leo's chest. "Who? The little ghost from the park. You've cost me millions. You think you're a hero. You're just a mistake. I think I'll take your life as a down payment for my losses." Before the broker's finger could tighten on the trigger, a heavy silver chain wrapped around his wrist, jerking his arm violently upward. Jax had moved through the crossfire like a wraith, his eyes burning with a lethal intensity. With a single devastating blow, Jax sent the broker crashing through the railing and into the oily harbor water. The girl was pulled to safety by Leo, who held her close as the chaos subsided. Within 30 minutes, the warehouse was secure. The police, tipped off by a secure line from the clubhouse, arrived to find 40 bikers standing in a protective circle around the rescued children. The traffickers were zip-tied in a humiliating row on the cold concrete. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering. Records showed hundreds of children had passed through this port. The broker was hauled out of the water, shivering and defeated, his empire of misery in ruins. The police sergeant who had dismissed Leo days ago walked into the warehouse, his face turning ghostly pale as he saw the scale of the horror Leo had uncovered. He looked at the holding cells, then at Jax, and finally at Leo, who was sitting on a crate wrapped in a Hells Angels leather jacket, sharing his water bottle with the young girl he had saved. The sergeant took off his cap, a gesture of profound humility that no one in the room expected. He walked up to Leo, ignoring the bikers for the first time in his career. "I owe you more than an apology, Leo. I looked at your tattered clothes, and I saw a problem. Not a person. I saw a nuisance that needed to be moved along, while you saw a crime that needed to be stopped." Because of you, because you refuse to be ignored, these families are going to sleep whole tonight. You're a better cop than I am. Jack stepped up, putting a massive protective arm around Leo's shoulders. He isn't just a kid anymore, Sarge. He's a lion, and he's our family. Now, if you ever look through him again, you're looking through all of us. He's the eyes of this neighborhood now. The story of the Lion of Miller Park became a legend that transformed the city's relationship with its marginalized citizens. The trafficking ring was dismantled from the top down, leading to arrests that reached into the halls of power and corporate boardrooms. The city council attempted to hold a public ceremony to give Leo a Medal of Valor and a key to the city, but true to his nature, he didn't show up. He didn't want a medal from a system that had ignored him for 18 years. He wanted the reality of the life he had earned through blood and courage. A month later, the Hells Angels held their own ceremony in the private sun-drenched courtyard of the clubhouse. They didn't give Leo a patch. He had his own path to walk, and they wanted him to stay clean for the future. Instead, they handed him a set of keys to a small, beautifully renovated apartment located directly above the Iron Grill diner, where they met every morning. Along with the keys was a thick, official-looking envelope, a full-ride scholarship to the university's sociology and law program, funded entirely by the club and the grateful parents of the neighborhood. The world needs eyes like yours, Leo. Jax told them as they stood on the clubhouse balcony, watching the sun set over a peaceful, vibrant Miller Park. You saved those kids because you knew exactly what it felt like to be invisible. You gave them a voice when you didn't even have one of your own. You turned your pain into a shield for others. Never let the world make you blink, and never let them tell you that you don't belong. Leo looked down at the playground. The black SUV was a memory replaced by the sounds of children playing safely and parents who finally felt the weight of the shadow lift from their lives. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a guardian, a symbol of what happens when the forgotten choose to fight back. And every Saturday, a row of 20 Harleys would park outside the diner, and the biggest, toughest men in the state would share a cup of coffee with the young man who had whispered the words that changed everything. Leo had found his pack, and the city had finally